to me in particular upon first watch, and I'm sure some folks in the audience also kind of had this experience. Um, to me, it's like you offer a critique and then you kind of critique the initial critique and it continues to unravel. And there's this quote, this is Martin Scorsese quote of like, a narrative, a good narrative is like, feels like you're peeling an orange.
Right.
And what's fascinating about that to me before I get to my question is like that first criticism, I think a lot of people would be used to seeing on like a mainstream outlet like in SNL or like even in Atlanta. Like I feel like a black man wearing a Trump suit is something that I would see on television from like a mainstream outlet. But then you like ossify it, and then you go further. You like continue to penetrate kind of the root cause. So I'm curious if you see your overall like filmography as like counterpoint to me. I mean, I guess it's like an obvious maybe answer, but like it's a counterpoint to like mainstream media and also just yeah.
I mean, totally. I mean, as I'm working though, I am thinking maybe not like specifically. I might specifically saying Mulder Malachi probably is the exception, but I'm not particularly saying, well, this is the way that they do it. Let me counteract it. I think with Spit and Whiteface, it was a process of an idea. Like Whiteface, I remember I had the idea, I saw the image, and then I had to ask myself, well, why is this image interesting to me? And then, like you said, I could stay with that and like write it in some kind of provocative way to get claps and laughs and provocateur points. But then I have to, any responsible artist will then ask themselves, well, why does this interest you? Right? And then the other thing that I could do is then like just condemn him for 21 minutes and go in this kind of like condemnation trail, right? Rather than say, no, this is the pernicious person he's become because of these structures. And then take it as an opportunity to look at the things that are happening within the social structures that make people make these kind of strange decisions. And then I think then you have interesting pieces that can actually like have utility. Those things who don't do that, or attempt to do that to me, they don't really have utility. They have the utility to get you famous or get you in, the conversation for, best short film award at Sundance Film Festival, and then you can go on to Hollywood and make, any big movie that you want, because they have to be surface level. They can't be a place where someone can look at themselves and honestly really question about even what they're doing. Like, what are you doing, or what are you a part of, or when I just kind of point my finger, am I like not going into the deeper kind of conversation around things? Yeah.
No, it's they don't have utility, and they also don't feel very sincere or
Right.
earnest. And I feel like that is a surprise out of like your work, or like there's like that quality of surprise. I mean, in terms of sincerity, like when I think about Mold Malachi in particular, there is this. The first time I watched it, and I wanted to like feel like how like the audience was responding to it the first time, because the first time I watched it, I did register. It was like cinematic recall. It was like I did register this like Ahmad Aubrey like parallel almost immediately, and then I was like, no, there's no way, because it was a bit. It's a bit like disorienting because I'm seeing these images that have been in my mind before, but it also has like the quality of a Nike like commercial. The way he's talking, he's like selling it. He's like selling this.
Glad you caught it.
Yeah. And like it was confusing, but it's confusing because your final point is so clear. Actually, there's like clarity there, and God, I hope I formed this into a question. I'm like, what is how do you feel about working with like sensitive like images like that, especially since you are working with comedy. I mean, that is like a really like I would be very nervous to work with that, you know.
I think with Mold of Malachi in particular, I think I I felt that I was at a kind of a breaking point, that the images were so proliferating that like I had to make an intervention. And but I knew from my opinion, and others might disagree, the intervention had to be pointed, specific, and it couldn't be quiet, or I couldn't take the corner route, right? You know, I couldn't. Then I think I would be doing a disservice, and I felt it was really necessary to. Well, then we talked about this, to do a first indictment, right? So the first indictment is the idea of the viewer. Like I said, there's a pernicious pleasure that comes in people's pain and suffering, and we see it on social media consistently. We just see it, right? But then, and this is what probably got me in trouble with some people, was the back end, was the people who are willing to predicate their life on what do the whites like. That's their mantra. That's what their constant thoughts are. Whether they want to admit it or not. Yes, I do the didactic. I doubt there are people who are at home with, maybe though, people at home who have that seated up there. But look, I know enough people who work in Hollywood who've admitted to me in not so many words that it's in their brain. That is in their brain. And I see when maybe I give a note to a fellow person who works in the Hollywood structure saying, hey, you know what? My response to this piece you're doing is going to be, this is some really, really pernicious stuff that's only going to serve empire and the first cinema world. And they'll ignore my comment and take the comment from the person who, you know, runs Warner Brothers and says, you know, that's it. Mm-hmm. That's what we want, right? So they are, that thing is in their head. Yeah. It is in their head. And, you know, the sensitive imagery, it's a, for me, cinema is a language. The way that you have to confront language sometimes is you have to speak the language and then you have to subvert it, redirect it, and go from there. I'm not someone who particularly cares for violence in movies, but on the flip side, I felt that in a world of proliferation of it, how was I going to discuss it? And I had to kind of face it frontal and then go from there and see. And I know it's funny that the part of my game with the movie was like I wanted people to honestly, for the first at least 4 to 5 minutes, be like not sure and like wonder like, did M2 like lose it?
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.